Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. When we think about Michael Jackson, our minds naturally jump straight to the blockbuster dominance of Thriller, the total defiance of bad, or the definitive breakthrough of Off the Wall. But to really understand the DNA of his genius, we have to go back to the very beginning. We need to look at a 14-year-old boy tasked with carrying the weight of a massive record label entirely on his shoulders. This 1972 album, Ben, is a fascinating artifact of early 70s pop soul that proves Michael was always so much more than just a novelty act. It is quite literally the sound of a superstar learning to stand on his own 2 feet.
Here is exactly how we're going to break down his metamorphosis into a solo superstar. Section 1, the Motown hit machine. Section 2, a ballad for a rat. Section 3, a voice in transition. And finally, Section 4, legacy beyond the rat.
So, this brings us to the core mystery of this explainer. How in the world did a 14-year-old singing a love song to a telepathic rat lay the foundation for the king of pop? I mean, on paper, it sounds like an absolute career-ending disaster, right? A complete laughingstock. But instead, it turned into pure magic. And to understand how that actually happened, we first have to look at the intense corporate machinery operating behind the scenes.
Section 1. The Motown Hit Machine.
You really have to wrap your head around the immense pressure placed on this young teen idol by 1972. From their breakthrough in 1969 through the early 70s, the Jackson 5 were an absolute commercial juggernaut. They scored 4 consecutive #1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100 in just an incredibly short span of time. We are talking about Beatlemania-style hysteria surrounding these young men. They were the first black teen idols to cross over to white audiences on such a massive scale since the heyday of the Supremes. And right in the dead center of this absolute whirlwind, barely a year after his solo debut got to be there, Michael is shoved back into the studio to record Ben.
Now, Motown founder Berry Gordy, he was a brilliant businessman first and foremost. He aggressively capitalized on Michael's crossover appeal. His strategy was to release Michael Jackson's solo albums simultaneously with Jackson 5 group albums to absolutely maximize revenue. And they didn't cut corners here. They recorded these tracks in Motown's West Coast studios using legendary heavy hitters, the session musicians known as the Wrecking Crew and Motown's in-house production team, the Corporation. They weren't just trying to make a kid's record. They were purposefully utilizing these legends to replicate the hit formula with a slightly more mature, ballad-heavy tone that would really showcase a developing artist.
Moving on to Section 2. A Ballad for a Rat.
Okay, we have to talk about the sheer, absolute absurdity surrounding the title track's creation. The contrast between the original concept and the final execution is just staggering. Ben was originally composed for a 1972 horror thriller film, a sequel to the cult classic movie Willard. The movie is quite literally about a lonely young man who befriends a telepathic, highly intelligent rat named Ben. That is what Michael Jackson, a massive global teen heartthrob, was tasked with singing about. But what Michael did with that premise was nothing short of alchemy. He didn't sing it as a joke. He sang to Ben as if this rat were a lonely, fundamentally misunderstood human being.
Just listen to these lyrics for a second. They don't see you as I do, I wish they would try to. I'm sure they'd think again if they had a friend like Ben. When you really take in those words, you realize his performance transcended the ridiculous premise. He turned a song about a literal rodent into this profound statement on the cruelty of the outside world. He poured such intense sincerity and vulnerability into the delivery that the public completely stopped caring about the horror movie context. Instead, they just heard a deeply moving song about friendship, isolation, and finding loyalty in a world that alienates you.
And you know what? People completely bought into the emotion. By September 1972, they rocketing this track straight to #1 on the Billboard charts. It really proved that Michael's emotional resonance was so powerful, it could carry literally any subject matter to the top.
To put that into perspective, he was only 14 years old. That monumental achievement made him the youngest male artist to ever have a solo #1 single. It's a record that held strong for decades. At just 14, he was outperforming the biggest adult stars in the world, carrying a massive solo hit entirely on his own.
And his earnest delivery didn't just conquer pop radio, it totally won over Hollywood too, earning him massive critical accolades. The song secured a Golden Globe for Best Original Song and even picked up an Academy Award nomination. He wasn't just a teen pop star anymore. He was cementing his place in the broader, much more serious entertainment industry.
All right, Section 3, a voice in transition. Beyond just the title track, the rest of the album is fascinating because it showcases a young artist actively learning how to interpret complex adult emotions. Sonically, the album polished that classic Motown sound into more of a soft rock hybrid, beautifully capturing a boy on the absolute cusp of physical and artistic change. Unlike the dance-heavy Jackson 5 hits, this album leans hard into acoustic guitars, lush orchestrated strings, and gentle piano. You can actually hear Michael stretching his vocal cords here, testing the limits, and learning to truly act through his voice.
His musical forensics on these covers are just brilliant. Take his take on the stylistics people make the world go round. Listening to a 14-year-old sing about poverty and sorrow is a bit jarring, but he doesn't over-sing it. He applies his incredibly sensitive, restrained melancholy. Then he takes immense courage to cover the Temptations' iconic My Girl, but he infuses it with this sped-up, buoyant, youthful joy that makes it totally his own. And with Stevie Wonder's Shooby-Dooby-Dooby-Day, he tightens the whole thing up for pop radio, showcasing some seriously playful scatting skills. And then you have these hidden gems, like In Our Small Way. It's this delicate, finger-picked folk pop ballad where his voice is so gentle it almost sounds like a whisper. It captures this early whispering altruism about contributing to world peace that totally foreshadowed his later philanthropic anthems, like We Are the World.
Now, despite some critics at the time calling the arrangements a bit syrupy, the album successfully bridged bubblegum pop and sophisticated soul. It was an undeniable success, quickly selling 500,000 copies and earning an RIAA Gold certification. For a solo teen act in 1972, you really couldn't ask for a better reception.
Which brings us to our final section, number 4, Legacy Beyond the Rat.
We have to look at how this specific moment laid the groundwork for his legendary adult career. Van was the undeniable prototype for his later iconic anthems of outsiderdom. It served as his very first thesis statement on longing, isolation, and trying to connect with an alienating world. When you listen to it, you're hearing the emotional predecessor to the misunderstood narrative of Billie Jean, the desperate plea for change in Man in the Mirror, and the ultimate crushing isolation of Stranger in Moscow. He spent his entire career exploring these themes, and the seeds were planted right here. Furthermore, this record serves as an incredibly nostalgic time capsule. It documents the exact fleeting moment his voice began shifting away from Motown's formula. It captures the very final era where Michael sounded entirely like a child prodigy, right before puberty stepped in and darkened his vocal tone for all his subsequent records. It's a sweet, melancholic document of a genius discovering his ultimate superpower. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. The king of pop didn't build his kingdom overnight. He literally started with a rat and a dream. He took an absurd premise, breathed genuine emotional life into it, and made millions of people connect deeply with a cinematic rodent. How many other legendary careers can you think of that began with such a strange, absolutely beautiful leap of faith?